Last month, I discussed how Donald Trump's presidential cabinet actually looked more like a board of directors and will probably end up functioning like one. But what will this mean for U.S. corporations in the months ahead? We could be in for the biggest regulatory shakeup since the New Deal. Or we could see endless legal and partisan wrangling, or we might see a muddling through middle course. Here are a few reckless predictions on how the new regime in Washington could shift the focus of your corporate board. First, President Trump said he intends to cut regulation by 75%, maybe more, and that he's adopting a policy of replacing two old regulations with any new one that's proposed. Now, even assuming lots of hyperbole, this is going to have an impact on corporate regulations. For example, hardly anyone's happy with DoddFrank reforms and the way they played out, which is one reason their pace of adoption slowed to a crawl. Assume that pending elements of Dodd-Frank will stay on ice and that some regulation on banks will be eased, but on the other hand, some more populist reforms, like a new version of Glass-Steagall, could be on the way. Of course, there'll be changes for all business when it comes to interest rates and finance. U.S. interest rates are finally rising out of the swamp, but finance and banking deregulation could counter this, with more willingness to lend and greater overall liquidity. Your board might want to give strategy a fresh look, particularly if you've been sitting on some cash or holding off on new investments. International trade, tax, and monetary policy also deserve some board review. The new administration talk about dropping or renegotiating trade deals involves lots of bluster, but it could still raise tariffs, shift export plans, and push you to onshore some overseas production. Major corporate tax cuts are also being batted around, but a wait-and-see approach on this is wise. Leadership changes at the SEC and Department of Justice should offer some regulatory and enforcement relief, but boards should watch closely for what the new department heads actually do. Enforcement here is often based less on black-letter rules than on policies and priorities of the people heading those departments. So the grumbling you've done over the last few years about regulatory burdens could be replaced by worries over regulatory uncertainty. Now, as a final note, the Trump administration is popping up with some new announcements daily, so all of the above points could be obsolete by the time you hear this. It's wise to set aside some board time for Trump talk at your next board meeting. I'm Ralph Ward from the Boardroom for February.